Sky News can reveal the government has been looking at some left-field options to try to get skilled workers into the country while continuing to get more than 34,000 stranded Australians home. The hotel quarantine program intake is being halved as of today. But as of last month, the federal cabinet was already beginning to look at how to get people into the country via quarantine methods and other facilities. Home Affairs has been looking into a 250-person facility on Christmas Island and the feasibility for that. This could be operational as soon as January next year. However, because of extreme weather, would only operate between July and October. Now, this would be used, theoretically, to get skilled workers into Australia. There is a big shortage right now. And make no mistake, this would be a significant shift from the government, which had been saying it did not want to use this facility. It would also seemingly fail two of the three requirements for quarantine set out by the government, that is being near an international airport and within an hour's drive of a tertiary hospital.
Of course, we talk about quarantine facilities and how we're running them and the improvements that are being made. I mean, the Premier had made comments last year about whether we should be using places like Christmas Island and things like that. And our advice has been very consistent that those are not conducive to the task.
Sky News does understand, though, Home Affairs has been tasked with looking at that, so we'll see what happens. Another left-field option being canvassed has been to use cruise ships for quarantine. With the industry, of course, essentially ground to a halt anyway during COVID, they'd have plenty of available vessels. It would need to be carefully managed given the COVID outbreaks on cruise ships early on in the pandemic, of course. And existing state and Commonwealth sites could also be expanded. There is already that deal in place with Victoria for the new quarantine site at Mickleham, but perhaps the most controversial option being discussed by Cabinet recently was whether or not to use Howard Springs to bring in what are described as targeted economic cohorts, so workers needed for Australia. Howard Springs is the Commonwealth Strategic National Quarantine Centre, and that is to prioritise getting Australians home. Given the lack of flights into Australia, the government would claim it would only be using unutilised capacity at the centre, but in Cabinet discussions, there has been a concession that having skilled workers come in via Howard Springs would need to be carefully managed to make sure Australians trying to get home do not feel as though they have been displaced. While there has been a clamour for brand new facilities to be built, of course, across the country with states, these options we've spoken about could be done in much more short-term timeframes. With the skills shortage already playing out in Australia, it's also worth noting these discussions had already begun well before the National Cabinet meeting, in which hotel quarantine numbers did halve. It seems the federal government was already bracing for reduced capacity.